Cole Hadley had everything a man was supposed to want. 12,000 acres of the finest cattle land in the territory. A house with imported windows that caught the morning light. Women smiled before he looked their way. And not one of those smiles had ever been for him. On a warm October Saturday at the Clover Creek Market, watching a large woman carry baskets alone while her father took the credit and the crowd laughed, he made a decision that would change both their lives. He was going to disappear. No name worth knowing. No land worth calculating. Just a drifter looking for honest work, and the answer to the only question that had ever kept him awake at night. Could a woman love a man who had nothing to offer but himself? He was about to find out. It had started with a single question from a well-dressed woman holding a tin cup. "This is extraordinary. Who makes this?" The woman behind the stall opened her mouth to answer. Large, obese, dark hair pinned under a worn bonnet, hands calloused and moving without pause, she had been working that stall since before sunrise while her father sat in the chair beside it doing nothing. Her father answered first. "Family operation," Gerald Calloway said, stepping forward with his chest out. "My recipe. Generations old." The well-dressed woman turned to him with warm interest. May Calloway turned back to her work without a word. Cole watched from his horse at the edge of the market. He had passed through Clover Creek 3 Saturdays running. He had seen this same scene each time. May behind the stall, working, lifting, carrying baskets of apples and berries from the cart to the press and back again, her body bent under the weight of them while her father sat and received the compliments of strangers. Each time Cole had told himself it was none of his business. Each time he had ridden on. He did not ride on this time. Because this time Gerald Calloway's face changed. A customer had questioned a price. Cole could not hear the exact words from where he sat, but he could see the shift in Gerald's expression. The quick, cold anger of a man who felt his authority questioned in public. Gerald turned to May. Said something short and sharp. May reached for the nearest basket to steady it. Gerald's boot came down on the fruit that had spilled at the edge of the stall. Not by accident. He crushed it deliberately, a slow, grinding pressure, and the juice of the berries splashed red across the dirt and across the hem of May's dress. He said something else. Low enough that the crowd nearest them could hear but not enough for the whole market to turn. May crouched down and began gathering the spilled fruit from the ground with her bare hands, her face down, her shoulders carrying something heavier than the baskets. The crowd nearby looked away. A few women near the baker's stall exchanged a glance and said nothing. One man near the fence post shook his head slowly and then looked at his boots. Nobody moved. Cole's hands tightened on the reins. He sat completely still for a long moment, watching May gather crushed berries from the dirt with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had done this before, who had learned exactly how to absorb cruelty without making it worse, who had stopped waiting for anyone to step between her and her father a long time ago. He turned his horse and rode directly to Hank Porter's property 2 miles east. Hank Porter had been Cole's closest friend since they were 8 years old. He was poor in the way Cole was wealthy, completely and without apology. Eleanor Hadley had spent 24 years trying to subtly discourage the friendship. It had never worked. Hank was mending his fence post when Cole rode up, the same fence post they had been using as an excuse for Cole's visits since they were 18 years old. It had never actually needed fixing. Hank looked up, read Cole's face, and set the bridle down. "What happened?" "I need your boots." Hank looked down at his feet. "Back up." "These are my only boots, Cole." "Henderson's window. The brown ones with the double stitching." "Any pair you want." "My account." The calculation behind Hank's eyes completed itself with undignified speed. He began unlacing. "You want to tell me why?" Cole told him. "All of it. The stall. The credit taken. The boot coming down on the fruit. May on her knees in the dirt." Hank was quiet for a moment. "So you're going to disguise yourself as a drifter and go work at her father's orchard?" "Yes." "Because you want to know if a woman would love a man with nothing?" "Yes." "Cole. I know. This is I know, Hank. Hank was quiet for a moment. Then the corner of his mouth moved. Those women your mother keeps bringing to Sunday dinner. What about them? If you're done with them, I mean since you're leaving and all. Hank. I'm just saying. The one last month with the blue dress seemed perfectly nice. Hank. I have excellent qualities, Cole. I'm very charming at dinner. Give me the boots. Hank handed them over, still grinning. What do I tell your mother? Tell her fence lines. Cole was already pulling on the worn canvas trousers he had bought off a market worker that morning for twice what they were worth. He changed behind Hank's barn, fraying jacket, uneven sleeves, a shirt that had seen better years. He rubbed dust through his hair until it lost its shape. Untucked everything. Hank studied him with the expression of a man evaluating a disaster he has agreed to be part of. Your hands are too smooth. They'll roughen. Your posture is too straight. Cole slouched. That looks like a wealthy man pretending to slouch. It'll do. Cole swung up onto a borrowed horse. Don't tell my mother. She's going to find out. Hank. She always finds out, Cole. He was already riding. The Callaway orchard announced itself before it came into view, the smell of apples and berries and would smoke on the autumn air, sharp and sweet and layered in a way that only came from years of working the same land in the same way. The farmhouse was weathered. The barn needed its east roof patched. The fence along the north field had 2 rails missing. But the press building was different. Its boards were tight and well fitted. The drainage channel beside it had been dug at a precise angle. The equipment visible through the open door was worn but meticulously maintained. Someone had built that operation carefully. Someone who understood what it could become. Gerald Callaway was in his chair outside the barn, hat tipped against the afternoon sun, doing what Cole had seen him do at the market stall. Nothing in particular while waiting for someone else to do everything. Cole dismounted. Read the man in 10 seconds. Pride that needed feeding. An ego that opened like a hand to flattery. He introduced himself as Jesse. A drifter. Looking for honest work, heading nowhere particular. He mentioned, as if recalling something heard along the road, that the Callaway Cider Press had a reputation as the finest operation in 3 counties. Gerald Callaway sat up straighter. Cole offered his labor for food and shelter only. No wages. Free labor was a language Gerald understood completely. May, he called toward the press building. This man will help with the heavy work. May appeared in the doorway. Flour sack apron. Sleeves rolled to the elbow. Dark hair coming loose from its pins after a full day's work. She looked at Cole the way she looked at everything. Directly, without performance, without warmth offered or withheld. A clear, honest assessment that asked nothing and expected less. The east barrels need moving before the afternoon batch, she said. Can you manage heavy lifting? Yes. She turned and walked back into the building. Cole followed her into the cool interior that smelled of crushed apples and cedar and work that never stopped. She pointed at the barrels. He moved them. She watched, assessed the placement, pointed at the next task without comment. His name was Jesse now. Standing in May Callaway's press barn with a barrel in his arms and the smell of her work all around him, Cole Hadley understood for the first time in his life what it felt like to be nobody. Just a man. No land behind him. No name preceding him. Nothing between him and the truth of what he was. It felt, unexpectedly, like relief. The first thing May Callaway taught Cole was that he knew nothing. Not unkindly. She simply showed him the press mechanism on the second morning, explained it once with clean, economical words, and then watched without expression as he proceeded to get it entirely backwards on the 3rd day. He heard the mechanism engage. He felt, a half-second too late, that something was wrong. And then cold apple cider came out of entirely the wrong part of the apparatus and hit him squarely in the chest, soaking through his shirt, running in small rivers down both forearms, dripping off his chin into the October air. He stood completely still. May appeared in the doorway behind him. He heard her stop walking. He could feel her looking at the press. then at him, then at the press again. She walked to the shelf, took a clean cloth, and held it out without a word. He took it. She walked away. And then, from somewhere deeper in the building, far enough that she must have thought he couldn't hear, came laughter. Genuine, unguarded, the kind that escapes before a person decides whether to let it out. It lasted only a moment before she collected herself. Then silence. Then the sound of her returning to work. Cole stood dripping in the morning air and thought, I would tip that barrel every single morning for the rest of my life for that sound. The days settled into a rhythm. Heavy work in the mornings, press operation in the afternoons, the particular satisfaction of learning something difficult from someone who knew it completely. May did not praise him and she did not coddle him. When he did something right, she said nothing. When he did something wrong, she told him once, clearly, and moved on. He found he preferred it to every compliment he'd ever received at a Sunday dinner. He was mucking out the south stall when his hand landed somewhere it should not have. He went completely still. Absolutely, profoundly still. The stillness of a man confronting something his entire previous life had not prepared him for. I need a moment, he said to no one in particular. May was passing the stall door with the feed bucket. She stopped, looked at his face, looked at his hand, looked at his face again. She walked away laughing, not the polite covered kind, the real kind, shoulders moving, hand pressed briefly over her mouth as she rounded the corner of the barn. Cole washed his hands 17 times. He counted. Hank arrived Tuesday morning with supplies and the particular expression of a man who intends to enjoy himself. He was leaning on the fence post when Cole came around the corner of the woodpile, both arms slightly extended from his body, 2 buffalo chips held between 2 fingers at maximum distance, his face carrying the expression of a man proceeding through consequences he could not unmake. Hank opened his mouth. Not one word, Cole said. Hank's shoulders began moving in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. May appeared in the press building doorway. Looked at Cole. Looked at Hank. Looked back at Cole. The fire needs fuel, Jesse. Today if possible. She went back inside. Hank walked to the other side of the barn with considerable urgency. Cole completed the task with his jaw set and his eyes fixed on the middle distance. But it was the buffalo milk that changed something. May handed him the warm pail one morning without explanation, the way she handed him everything, directly, matter-of-factly, as if the world were a straightforward place and tasks simply needed doing. Cole drank it, went completely still, set the pail down with great care, and quietly walked behind the barn. May said nothing. She turned back to the press and asked him no questions when he returned 5 minutes later, pale and dignified. After that, something in the orchard shifted warmer. He couldn't have said exactly when it happened, somewhere between the manure and the milk and the morning she offered her hand to pull him out of the mud under the apple tree, neither of them mentioning the state he was in, both of them pretending it was entirely normal to be covered in October mud before breakfast. He was learning her by then. The way she hummed when she was deep in a task, low and tuneless and entirely unconscious. The way she talked to the equipment in small sounds, satisfaction when something worked, a quiet word when it didn't, as if the press were a difficult but respected colleague. The way she fed every hungry person who came to the gate without discussion or delay. A boy from the neighboring property, an old woman heading to town, a drifter not entirely unlike the one Cole was pretending to be. He asked her about it one afternoon, falling in beside her with a heavy basket she hadn't asked him to carry. She let him take it, which surprised him. You give food to everyone who comes to the gate, he said. Yes. Why? She was quiet for a few steps. Someone did it for me once when I needed it. She didn't say more. She didn't need to. Hank brought supplies that 3rd week. The French soap was tucked at the bottom of the saddlebag, Parisian, wrapped in paper, the kind that had no business being within 100 miles of a working orchard. Cole had tucked it away quickly, but not quickly enough. May found it the next morning when she came to leave his food. She picked it up, turned it over, set it down. This is Parisian soap. I found it, Cole said. On the road. It was a remarkable day. She looked at him for a moment with those clear, unhurried eyes. Then she set the soap down and left without another word. That evening, when Cole came back to the barn, the soap had been moved quietly to the shelf above his cot. The good shelf, the dry one, the place where something worth keeping belonged. He stood looking at it for a long time. She hadn't mentioned it. She hadn't made it a moment. She had simply given him back his dignity without asking him to account for it. He understood, standing in that barn in the October dusk, that this was what she did. Not just for him. For everyone. She saw what people needed and she provided it without making them feel small for needing it. He began to watch for it, the way she gave and the way others took. He didn't have to wait long. The men came on a Thursday market day. 3 of them, regular customers by their ease. They took 2 jugs, made a show of checking their pockets, and the tallest one said he seemed to be a little short today. He'd settle up next week. Same as the week before. Same as the week before that. One of them lingered after the others moved off. Leaned on the post with his arms crossed. You know, May, if you were a little friendlier I might be more reliable about payment. His friend laughed from a few feet away. Besides, who else is going to pay attention to you? Be grateful for the company. May kept working. Maybe I'll marry you someday, he said. When I run out of better options. More laughter. Then they were gone and the 2 jugs with them. Cole heard May tell her father what had happened, her voice steady and factual, and he heard Gerald's answer carry through the press wall without difficulty. This is your fault. You must have done something to put them off. You can't manage simple transactions without creating problems, can you? May said nothing more. That evening Cole was still at the press after dark. May came to close up and found him there. You don't have to stay, Jesse. I know. The next market day Cole was at the stall. He lifted barrels, loaded the cart, stood where he could be seen. When the 3 men arrived and found 6 feet of quiet, watchful presence behind the woman they'd been helping themselves to, something in their calculations changed very quickly. They paid the full balance. They did not linger. May said nothing about it. That evening there was an extra portion outside the barn door. More bread, a cut of cold meat, a second cup beside the first. Cole sat down on the ground right there and ate every bit of it, looking up at the stars through the bare October branches. 12,000 acres. Imported windows. A name that opened every door in the territory. None of it had ever felt like this. Hank arrived on a Tuesday morning wearing the expression of a man delivering news he was also finding privately hilarious. Cole went to meet him before he got too close to the press building. Your mother, Hank said without preamble, has stopped me on the road 4 times this week. Where is he, Hank? What is he doing? Why won't he write? Tell her fence lines. I have told her fence lines. She has developed opinions about fence lines. Cole started to answer. Then he heard May's footsteps on the porch behind him and turned to find her standing in the doorway, close enough to have heard most of it. Hank's expression changed. The face of a man who had identified a situation and chosen the single worst possible response to it. Your mother, Hank said, turning to Cole with the gravity of a man delivering tragic news, is very ill. Barely gets out of bed. Poor woman. Difficult for everyone. Cole stared at him. Hank looked back with perfect innocent commitment. May came down the steps. You have a mother, Jesse? She's ill? She's... He doesn't like to talk about it, Hank said solemnly. Very devoted to her. Worries constantly. It's honestly one of his finest qualities. May's face had gone soft with genuine concern, the same uncomplicated care she turned on the hungry boy at the gate, asking nothing back. You should go to her, she said. If she's that unwell, Jesse, you should go. She's fine, May. Hank just said she barely gets out of bed. Cole looked at Hank. Hank studied the middle distance with great interest. May disappeared inside. She came back 2 minutes later with a small cloth purse and pressed it into Cole's hand. He felt the weight of it, coins, not many but real. Earned before sunrise and carried since. For the road, she said simply. Go and come back when you can. Cole looked down at the purse. She had nothing. She worked from dark to dark, and her father took what she earned, and she began again the next morning. And she was standing here pressing her savings into the palm of a man she had known 3 weeks because once, a long time ago, someone had done a kindness for her and she had never once stopped paying it forward. May, I can't take this. You can and you will. Go. Hank had turned completely away. His shoulders were doing something that had nothing to do with coughing. Cole closed his fingers around the purse. Thank you, May. She nodded once and went back inside. The moment they cleared the corner of the barn, Hank abandoned all dignity entirely. She gave you money, Hank. Her own savings. To visit your sick mother. I will sell that horse you're riding. The most powerful cattle rancher in the territory standing in a barnyard holding a poor woman's coin purse. Cole rode ahead. Hank's laughter followed him down the road. He arrived at Eleanor's house that evening without changing. Eleanor opened the door. 3 full seconds passed. Her eyes traveled from Hank's cracked boots at the bottom, slowly, painfully, up the canvas trousers, the fraying jacket, the untucked shirt, and finally arrived at his face with the expression of a woman who had prepared herself for bad news and discovered the news was considerably worse than anticipated. Her hand came up and pressed flat against her chest. You smell, she said, like a barnyard. Hello, Mother. Cole Hadley. I'm working on something. Come inside. She stepped back. Don't touch the wallpaper. Don't sit on the green chair. Don't sit on the blue chair either. Actually, she looked at him again, don't sit on anything. He stood in the middle of her immaculate parlor with its imported wallpaper and its Persian rugs and its furniture chosen from a catalog that had been shipped from Philadelphia at considerable expense. Eleanor circled him once the way a person circles something they cannot quite believe is happening in their own home. Those are Hank's boots. Yes. Of course they are. She pressed her fingers to her temple. Is Hank aware that you have his boots? He has new ones. I don't want to know. She held up one hand. I genuinely do not want to know any part of this. Sit, not on anything upholstered. Sit on that wooden chair by the window and tell me what is happening. I can't tell you yet. Cole. Mother. She looked at him for a long moment with the particular expression she reserved for situations that had exceeded her capacity for management. Then she went to make coffee. She did not ask again. But when he stood to leave, she said one thing quietly from the doorway. Are you happy? She had never asked him that. Not once in 32 years. He thought of May's laugh escaping through the press building wall. Coffee on the fence post with no note. The soap on the shelf. Yes, he said, surprised to find it completely true. Eleanor watched him ride away with the expression of a woman solving something. He put May's coins back before dawn. Left them on the press counter without explanation, in the dark, before she woke. She found them. Looked toward the barn for a long moment. That morning she brought him coffee and a fresh biscuit without being asked, and he drank it standing in the barn doorway watching the apple rows emerge from the early mist, and it tasted like everything he hadn't known he was looking for. By the 5th week they had settled into something without naming it. Evenings on the fence, the cold coming up through the ground. Cole heard himself say quietly, My brother Daniel loved places like this. Orchards. Open land. May was still. He died when I was 24. Fever. 3 days and then he was gone. He had not said those words to another living person in years. They came out lighter than he expected, not weightless, but carried better for being spoken. May did not fill the silence with comfort words. She stayed, present and steady and not needing to fix anything. After a long time, he sounds like someone worth missing. Cole nodded. The dark came in around them. An owl called from somewhere in the north trees. May was quiet for a moment more and then, in the same low, careful voice he had just used, My father wanted a son. Cole didn't move. He has never said it plainly. He has never needed to. She looked out at the orchard, her orchard, every row of it planted and tended and pressed by her hands. I have known it my whole life the way you know the weather. You don't need anyone to tell you it's raining. She didn't say more. She didn't ask for anything back. Cole sat beside her in the dark and understood something he hadn't fully understood before. Why she worked without expecting credit, why she had learned so completely to be invisible, why she handed dignity back to other people so gently and so naturally. She had never been given any of her own. Hank came to find Cole that afternoon. He'd passed May on the way. She was crouched between the orchard rows with a barn cat winding itself around her ankles, talking to it low and unhurried, completely unself-conscious. He found Cole at the press and stood there a moment before he spoke. She had a dog before, he said, not really to Cole. Some scruffy brown thing. Her father sold it 2 winters back to a family in Millhaven. Which family? Hank stopped. Looked at Cole carefully. Cole. Which family, Hank? Hank told him. Cole brought Scout home on a gray Thursday morning. He stayed in the barn. He let Hank ride through the gate with the saddlebag, let May be crossing the yard with her basket when Hank dismounted and opened the flap. Scout came out of that bag like something launched from a catapult. A medium-sized brown dog of no particular breeding and incandescent, overwhelming, total joy, across the yard in 4 seconds, hitting May at full speed, and May's basket went sideways and apples scattered across the dirt, and May sat down. Not because she fell. Because her legs simply stopped holding her. Scout was everywhere at once, climbing her shoulders, pressing his whole trembling body against her, making a sound that was almost human. May wrapped both arms around him and buried her face in his neck and rocked, laughing and crying at the same time, laughing the way people cry and crying the way people laugh until they cannot be told apart. You came back, she kept saying into his fur. You came back, you came back. Cole stood in the barn doorway. Hank appeared silently beside him, and they stood together without speaking. 3 times what that dog was worth, Hank said quietly. Cole watched May in the dirt of her orchard, surrounded by scattered apples, holding that ridiculous dog in the October morning. Worth every penny, he said. After a long time May looked up. Her hair had come completely loose. She had dirt on her apron and her hands and her face was wet and she looked, Cole thought, more completely herself than he had ever seen her. Like something she had been holding tightly for a long time had finally been allowed to open. She looked at him in the doorway. And he watched the recognition move through her. Not gratitude, something older and deeper than that, something that didn't have a simple name. He nodded once. She nodded back. Scout stayed at her heels for the rest of the day and every day after that. He arrived earlier each morning. She pretended not to notice. He fixed the broken press wheel overnight without being asked. She found it at first light, ran her hand over the repair without comment. The press is working better today. Is it? He had started saving the bruised apples she always set aside, and one morning he asked why she kept them. They make the best cider, she said. Everyone throws away what looks wrong. But they have more flavor than the perfect ones. Cole went quiet, turned that over for a long time. She didn't know exactly when she started noticing the small things that didn't add up. She noticed his hands first. The calluses were real, but the healing underneath was too clean, too quick for a man who'd worked rough his whole life. He knew too much about land management. Water rights. Said things in passing that didn't belong to a hired hand. One evening he came and she caught the faint smell of cologne before she could help it. She looked at him for a moment in the lamplight. You smell expensive tonight, Jessie. He went still. She went inside. She didn't know what to make of it. But she filed it away, the way she filed everything, quietly and without conclusion. It was the 6th week when May took in his jacket to mend it. The letter fell from the inside pocket. She picked it up without thinking, and then sat very still. Cole Hadley. Hadley Cattle Company. Territory of Texas. She sat with it in her hands for a long time. Then she folded it, put it back, and kept mending. 2 days passed. She watched him differently. He didn't notice. The third morning they were working side by side at the press when she said it quietly, without looking up. Cole. Just his name. Quietly. Like she had been carrying it in her mouth for 2 days and was finally setting it down. He went absolutely still. She kept her eyes on her work. He put down what he was holding. And then he told her everything. Why he had come. What he had been trying to learn. He did not make himself sound better than he was. You came to find out if a poor woman would love you truly, she said. Yes. And I was asking completely the wrong question. He stopped. Made himself say it plainly. The question was whether I was worthy of you. May looked at him for a long moment. Then she set down her tools. Leave, please. He left. Cole came back the next morning before sunrise. He didn't knock. He didn't explain. He picked up the work and he did it, alone, in the gray pre-dawn, while the barn was still dark and the press building was locked. She watched from the window and didn't come out. The morning after that, there was coffee on the fence post when he arrived before dawn. She was already inside by the time he found it. The third morning she came out. They worked side by side in complete silence, and neither of them mentioned any of it. Then, you're holding the press handle wrong again. He almost smiled. Didn't quite. He adjusted. She said nothing more. But she stayed. Eleanor's carriage appeared at the orchard gate 3 days after the fence. Cole came down from the barn roof slowly. He had always known she would find him. Eleanor stepped out with the unhurried precision of a woman who had never once arrived anywhere unprepared. She looked at the farmhouse, the barn, the press building, the neat apple rows, took it all in with a small composed smile. How charming! Cole, you cannot be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. May had come out of the press building. She stood in the yard with her apron on, sleeves rolled, hands still carrying the faint stain of berry pressing. She looked at Eleanor the way she looked at everything, directly, without performance, without apology. Eleanor looked back. The kind of look that was used to making people feel small. May did not feel small. She simply looked back. She works an orchard, Eleanor said to Cole, as though May were not standing 10 feet away. She built that orchard. Different thing entirely. Eleanor returned to her carriage with the posture of a woman who has not lost and does not intend to. On the road back to town she sat very straight and thought about the way that woman had looked at her. Not defiance. Not nerves. Just steadiness. The stillness of someone who had decided long ago what she was worth and stopped waiting for anyone to confirm it. Eleanor could not stop thinking about it. That evening Gerald called May inside. He sat at the kitchen table with the look of a man who had solved a difficult problem and expected to be thanked for it. I've arranged something, he said. A man named Clifford Mason. Widower, respectable. He needs someone to manage his house and God willing provide an heir. Since his property borders ours, he's agreed you can keep working the press after the wedding. He folded his hands. You'll have a roof, a name, food on your table. May stood in the kitchen doorway. A woman your age, Gerald said. Your size. You should be grateful someone is willing. He said it without cruelty. That was almost the worst of it. The complete matter-of-factness of it, like he was reading from a ledger entry. He's coming Friday to look at the orchard, Gerald said. Be presentable. May went back to work. Friday morning Cole was repairing the north fence when Clifford Mason arrived. He watched without appearing to watch, a large man in a good coat, practical eyes, moving through the orchard rows with the assessing interest of someone calculating value rather than admiring it. Gerald walked beside him pointing things out with the pride of a man showing off work he had not done. They stopped near the barn. Clifford's voice carried easily in the cold morning air. She's not what I'd choose, he said to Gerald. But the work here is good and a man needs someone to keep house. I suppose she'll do. The barn wall between May and those words was thin boards and nothing else. Cole set down his fence rail. He stood very still for a long time after Clifford and Gerald walked back toward the house. That evening he worked beside May until dark without being asked and without explanation. She did not ask why he stayed. He did not offer it. When she finally went inside, he sat on the fence in the cold and looked at the press building she had built and the apple rows she maintained and the orchard that existed because of her hands and her knowledge and her years of quiet, relentless work. He sat there until the cold went deep. Then he rode to Hank. "Be ready tomorrow morning," Cole said. "Early." Hank looked at him once. "The good boots?" "The good boots." By the time the sun came up, Cole was already riding. May heard the horse before she saw anything. She was inside the press building turning the morning's first batch when the sound came through the wall. One horse, then two, then the slow roll of carriage wheels on the road. She kept her hands moving. Gerald had told her Clifford was coming at 9. She had decided she would keep working until Gerald called her out because the moment she stopped working was the moment this became real. She kept her hands moving. Outside, Gerald came off the porch when he heard the gate. He expected Clifford. He saw Cole Hadley dismount. The recognition did not come all at once. It came in pieces, the horse first, too fine for a drifter. Then the coat. Then the boots. Then the face he had been looking at for 6 weeks across his own yard over his morning coffee. Jesse. Gerald stood completely still. 6 weeks. The barn. The food. The free labor. The man who had complimented his cider and offered to work for nothing and slept under his roof and eaten at his table and seen, Gerald understood with a cold dropping sensation, everything. Every morning Gerald had sat in his chair while his daughter carried the weight of the whole operation alone. Every time he had turned May's problems back on her. Every casual cruelty. Every "you should be grateful." All of it witnessed by Cole Hadley. Gerald's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Hank swung off his horse and walked to the press building door and stood in front of it with his arms folded. Not aggressive. Just present. The unmistakable presence of a man who was not moving. Gerald found his voice. "You were in my barn." "Yes," Cole said. He did not stop walking. He walked to the press building door and looked at Hank, who stepped aside, and he opened it. May turned from the press. She looked at him, the real him, the coat, the boots, the face she had known as Jesse for 6 weeks, and said nothing. Her hands were still on the press handle. Cole stepped inside, closed the distance between them, stopped close enough that his voice was just for her. "I came here with nothing to find out if someone could love a man for himself." May looked at him. "You answered that," he said. "Every single day you answered it without knowing I was asking." Her hands came off the press handle slowly. "I know what I did," he said. "I know what it cost you to trust Jesse. I am asking if you can trust Cole." The press building was very quiet. Outside, Gerald had found his voice again. The sound of it reached them through the wall, rising, indignant, the particular outrage of a man who had been caught and was trying to turn it into someone else's fault. Hank's voice came back. Quiet. Immovable. "I wouldn't." Silence. May looked at Cole for a long time. Then she reached past him to the small shelf beside the press door where she kept a cup for tasting. She filled it from the morning batch. Held it out. He took it. Drank. She watched his face. "Still wrong," she said. Something broke open in his expression. Not a laugh exactly. The release of a man who has been holding something for 6 weeks and has finally been given permission to put it down. "Teach me," he said. "I've been trying." He took her hand. She let him. They came out of the press building together. Clifford Mason looked at Cole Hadley and made the only reasonable calculation available to him. He picked up his hat from the fence post where he had set it. He nodded once at nobody in particular. He left. Gerald stood in his yard with his mouth opening and closing and nothing useful coming out of it. Eleanor had stepped down from her carriage. She walked forward and stopped in front of Gerald. Not Cole, not May, Gerald. She looked at him the way she had looked at things that disappointed her for 60 years. She said nothing. She did not need to. Gerald sat down in his chair. It was the chair he had always sat in. The one beside the stall where he watched his daughter work. He sat in it now and looked at the orchard May had built and said nothing more. Eleanor turned to May. Looked at her the way she had looked at her in the yard, that same assessing look, the one May had met without dropping her eyes. "I see why he stayed," Eleanor said simply. May looked back at her. "He pressed it wrong for 6 weeks. Eleanor's mouth did something it did not often do. "Come to dinner Sunday," she said. "Both of you." She returned to her carriage. Scout sat at May's feet and thumped his tail against the ground 3 times. Hank appeared beside Cole. "That," Hank said quietly, watching Eleanor's carriage turn onto the road, "went better than I expected." "Go home, Hank." "Absolutely not." Eleanor Hadley was back at the orchard 3 months later, but she wasn't in her carriage. She sat in the chair by the barn, Gerald's old chair, and she helped core apples badly. With complete confidence in her own method, which was wrong in ways that managed to be inventively different each week. May tried to correct her. Eleanor had opinions. Strong ones. Delivered with the certainty of a woman who had been right about most things for 60 years and saw no reason to stop now. They argued about it every single Sunday. Neither one gave an inch. Both of them kept coming back. Cole sat on the porch steps with Hank beside him, Scout sprawled across both their feet in the pale winter sun, listening to the sound of his mother and his wife disagreeing about fruit through the open barn door. "Your mother," Hank said, with the deep satisfaction of a man who had been waiting 3 months to say it, "is losing an argument about apples to your wife." "I know. She hasn't lost an argument since 1871. "I know." Hank settled back with his fine Henderson boots crossed at the ankle. "This is still the best thing that has ever happened to me." "Go home, Hank." "Never." From inside the barn May laughed. Sudden and genuine, the laugh that still surprised her sometimes, the one that came out before she remembered she was allowed to have it. Cole closed his eyes. Just listened. That laugh in the cold Sunday air, threaded through the smell of apples and wood smoke and the sound of his mother refusing to be wrong about fruit. He had ridden 12,000 acres in every direction looking for something he couldn't name. It had been here the whole time, waiting for him to be nobody long enough to finally become himself.